Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's Ironside Take 30 with a Data Advisor. Today, we're talking about leveraging AWS governance at scale to accelerate your cloud adoption. If we can go to the next slide. So my name is Jeff Spear, and I'm from Ironside Group. I run the information management practice at Ironside, where we work with a lot of database cloud migrations. Joining us is Doug Vanderpool from AWS, who's going to talk about governance at scale, and Chris Seller and Dean Nelson from Cloud Products, which is a firm that Ironside is working with a lot to help with the governance side of things. So here at Ironside, we want to help you use your data to make better decisions about your business. We've been doing it for 25 years. We can go to the next slide. And we have a variety of ways to do that, starting with strategic advisory, doing sort of roadmaps, health checks, assessments, making sure you're going in the right direction. Design, including experience design, UX, as well as data modeling, building out data warehouses, visualizations, dashboards, ML models, deploying them, and also governing them. And that covers things like master data management, coming up with governance organizations and structure, but also the kind of sort of governance at scale processes that we'll be talking about today. And then we also have a managed services practice to help run, if you want to help run your AWS platform or just administer certain tools on it. We can help with that as well. So we have a variety of ways we can help you, and we'd like to get involved. So today we're going to sort of frame the problem a little bit. We're going to talk about what governance at scale is, how it can help you in context of the modern analytic framework that we've been talking about a lot on the Ironside Take 30s, and how these various firms are working together to help bring you governance at scale. And I think with that, I'll pass it over to Chris.
Good morning, everyone. It's Chris Eller from Cloud Products. So just to sort of talk about the problem this morning. So a lot of customers, when they initiated and started on AWS, it was oftentimes a line of business that literally went in and created their first account by themselves. They owned all aspects of dev and product development. They had phenomenal success, right? So they moved to the cloud to increase velocity, to get a strategic project going. They got that going, and even though it may have cost a little bit more, that they literally paid for it on their credit cards, they were very happy, right? They thought that they were any of the additional ownership that they took on, the cost was well worth it, because they got this kind of strategic initiative going, and they had 100% control and visibility. The challenge that customers have started to face as the cloud and AWS usage became more pervasive within the organization, the centralized IT teams got more involved. They started putting in a lot of practices more similar to what they've done on-prem, and the lines of businesses have saw that their velocity has started slowing down, started to look a little bit more like what things were on-prem, and costs continued to go up, but the they weren't getting the same amount of business volume or business value as they were when they initially got started on cloud. And what happened is their cloud adoption got stuck, right? The value proposition didn't seem to be as strong as it was earlier on. Things started to seem a little bit the same as they were before, and costs continued to go up, sometimes in situations where costs where they thought that there was going to be cost avoidance with things on-prem. Some of the applications and systems that they migrated to cloud, they continue to run in kind of both places, and there was a level of frustration, and the adoption kind of stalled. And that's what we're kind of here to talk about today, is how leveraging the AWS governance at scale framework can help customers kind of return to that trajectory, if you will, right? So how do I behave like I did initially? How do I still get the velocity that I had initially? And where I'm still, though, however, kind of making everyone happy, making centralized IT happy with that systems are being appropriately governed, that there's security and they're adhering to company standards. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Doug Vanderpool from the AWS ProServe Advisory Team.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for spending the time with us today to talk about governance at scale and how it can help you improve your cloud journey. So we're going to start with kind of defining what governance at scale is, the program that we provide and the framework and what it handles and helps you avoid as an AWS customer. And we've done that by separating it into 4 pillars. So we've got a pillar that addresses AWS accounts. So specifically, what is the first thing that one must do before you do anything else in AWS? And that is create an account. So the process of creating that account, the governance around attaching it to a budget and the backend financial system, which is covered in financial management, which is the next pillar of governance, along with the idea of how do we make sure that we're secure and that we're following all the right policies, procedures, and the right configurations are in place, both at the account level and with the infrastructure that's within the account. And that's all handled within configuration management. And then lastly, data management. So we all know how important data has become, both as a source of revenue and also in some cases a source of risk if it gets into the wrong hands and that sort of thing. So the notion of making sure that the data that we have is accessible by the right people at the right time with the right permission levels so that you can glean value out of that data, and also so that data remains safe and secure and only able to be accessed by the right people, again, at the right time, and that we know who's accessing it and all that sort of thing. So that's how we've divided out, and that's how we define governance, and specifically governance at scale. So I'll talk a little bit about the different pieces of each of those and each of the pillars. So an account management pillar of governance, we talk about things like what your account strategy is. So you should always have an account strategy. Before you open an account, you should know what business unit it is, and perhaps even all the way down to the level of what application does that account house, for example. Okay, so that we handle that within the account strategy portion of account management. And then how do you handle the life cycle of accounts? Spinning them up, getting rid of them or disabling them when they're no longer useful or they've expired their life. And then also this notion of how do we vend an account, how do we baseline an account, which means how do we set it up properly, again, with the right access by the right people at the right time. How do we integrate that with a service catalog and allow business units and to use the service catalog to lay down infrastructure within those accounts? So again, back to what Chris mentioned before, if you ever have a conversation with anybody from AWS, one of the things that you'll most certainly hear is this notion of using the platform to spurn innovation within your organization, and also to unlock this notion of being able, again, to innovate and also being able to pivot quickly and be agile to changing business environments. And without a governance framework that is flexible and can implement security and all sorts of different policy in that manner, you will not be able to both innovate and maintain that business agility. The last one is there's identity management, of course, just integrating with probably what you already have today, something like an Active Directory, for example. And then the financial pillar, which is something that we always say, you need to start looking at this on day one. Most enterprises these days are fairly good at this in an on-premise situation, but things change quite rapidly and dramatically in the world of cloud computing. And adjusting your processes and adapting to that difference is going to make the difference in your success or limited success. So it's super important. And part of that is making sure that you allocate a budget, that you're tracking to that budget. The visibility that you get in cloud computing versus what you're getting on-prem is a huge difference and should be a game changer from a business perspective, and not leveraging that from day one is a miss in our view. So make sure that you do that. The next is configuration management. It's all the other things outside of kind of this notion of finance, and also outside this notion of a broader overall policy or configuration that is account wide. So it might be things like a certain security policy on an S3 bucket or an EC2 instance, or any other kind of policy configuration or directive that needs to be followed that's more specific to infrastructure within an account. And then the last one is around data management. How do you get your data repositories to have the quality such that you can trust the outputs of those, and then also the access and sharing, the policies and guidelines and ownership and all of that sort of thing around data management. And that's part of the reason that we've chosen to partner with Ironside, is that they're really astute at this and have always taken good care of this in an on-premises situation, and have translated that good behavior into policies and so forth in the cloud. So we can go ahead to the next slide. So what do we hear from a challenge standpoint that's common? So in order to implement a governance framework, you really have got to have organizational support. So most large enterprises have a lot of different players in the organization that may have political capital or may have real capital in the form of budgets for their organization. And what we want to do is implement a framework that allows that business unit and those people with in positions of authority and influence to solve these challenging problems in a way that doesn't negatively affect their business. And that's what we talk about at Governance at Scale. And that's why this framework might differ from other things. It is not a jam down your throat governance kind of framework and strategy. It really is more of a pull situation where you're allowing them to solve the problems in their own way while still making sure that you achieve the end goal. A multi-account strategy is super important in this realm. You'll find a lot of companies that tend to want to have like a multi-account, or sorry, an account structure where you've got shared accounts and where you've got multi-tenancy. And what we've found is over time that is far harder to manage than separating the accounts out and implementing a framework like Governance at Scale that helps you manage all those myriad accounts. We all want financial governance and transparency. This framework allows you to have something that you probably wish you had and never really did have in an on-premises scenario, so that you really know how much things cost, whether it's a development environment or production environment or a specific application. Things like data privacy and protection is super important. This gives you a framework in which to put all those policies and procedures, see them in a library, and then have a policy engine that will apply them to your entire estate. So super important there. Integration. So again, enterprises come to the table with lots of different tools, and we know that you've got significant investments in these tools, things like ServiceNow, Salesforce.com, many others, right? What we want to do is integrate into those systems and the already the procedures and maybe workflows that you've already got that are working well. Let's integrate into those and expand their use rather than say, oh, you need to use something completely different and we need to start it from scratch. The notion of delegation of non-technical interfaces, again, giving visibility into and ownership, okay, of making sure that compliance is in place and being enforced, both from a financial standpoint and from a security and other standpoints. The only way you do that is giving visibility into that by all the parties, all the way down to the developer level, making sure that they know that it's their responsibility to make sure that the company stays secure. It's not just some security organization's responsibility. And we've gone through a gate and signed off, so I can wash my hands of this. That's not the way we operate. And a good, solid governance framework that's flexible, like I mentioned, enables that to happen. Business unit at a time, we already talked about that. Just giving business organizations a way to say yes, and a way to say yes, governance is a good thing. We understand that we need it. We want to protect ourselves in the company, and allowing them to do that in a flexible manner so that they still achieve the goal, but do it in a way that isn't negative to their business is critical for support. And then the last is data quality and tools. And we talked already a little bit about that, like how do you make sure that the data is of sufficient quality and then remains of sufficient quality. And then lastly, just because of the participation here and the fact that Ironside is really focused in this data management area, wanted to make sure that we really drill into that a little bit. And the data management pillar of governance really reviews your current data strategy, your governance processes, and all of those in accordance with the notion and changes that come with cloud. So you get a lot of additional flexibility and ability to do things that could be very negatively impactful. We want to make sure that we're managing that in real time so that we, again, unlock this innovation, unlock this value in the data, but don't open up the company to any of the negative sides of that. So assisting your team in making the right decisions to build the appropriate policies and assign the correct ownership for data assets, as well as aligning a data strategy and or developing a data strategy that fits with your business incomes and fits nicely with all of the new capability that comes along with cloud.
Thanks a lot, Doug. We wanted to talk about how governance at scale integrates with the modern analytics framework that we've been talking about on quite a few Take30. So for those of you just tuning in, the modern analytics framework is Ironside's point of view on how you should be doing analytics in today's environment, and that includes AWS. So really, the focus is on the left on rapid insight generation, where you have a variety of different types of knowledge workers with different skill sets and different tools, accessing different types of data to produce their insights. And they are so they are sort of asking the new questions, and they ask a question, they get some data out, they play with it, they find something that's an insight, they see how valuable that is. What we want to do is not have them get bogged down in how do they continue to deliver that value. The old formula of they make an Excel spreadsheet and then they are refreshing that Excel spreadsheet every week or every month or every day for the rest of time. So on the other side, you've got automated value delivery. So you want to take something that is of value and hand it off to people who are good at automating it and let them handle, this is the best way to get this value out to the right audience. And so what makes that possible in the middle is data as a service. And so we recognize that there are many different levels of data refinement, from raw data like a data lake all the way up to a refined data warehouse. But there are many solutions in between. And for different people, they may want or need to access data at those different levels of refinement. So rather than sort of putting everything in a warehouse, which is very easy to access, but takes a lot of work to develop and maintain, the idea is to say, okay, well, how valuable is this data or this insight? Let's refine the data to the right point for that value, so we're putting in an appropriate amount of effort. And so what you end up with is a system with a lot more moving parts, a lot more sort of, instead of sort of this one big monolithic warehouse, a lot of smaller data zones and a lot of smaller tools moving data around, and a lot more people accessing it. And that's really the goal, is to have a wide variety of people working with the data, doing what they need to do, doing what they want to do to generate insight. And that really is where governance at scale fits in. Like Doug said, we want people to use the tools they want to use to do the things that they want to do with the data. We're not trying to say this is how you work with it. We want to make sure that people can come at the data in different ways. And as we pointed out, especially in week 4 of the series on the modern analytics framework, that does mean that there's more governance involved. So doing things like making sure that account management is automated, and that especially in AWS or any cloud framework, that costs are well understood and budgeted, and everything is configured in such a way that the governance enables that kind of framework. It's very important. So these two things are really very tightly integrated. You're going to need this kind of governance because you'd absolutely want to scale up your framework so that you're producing more and better analytics. So how is everybody working together? Take it away, Chris.
All right, hang on a second here. My screen
Yep.
a little weird. Yes, thanks, Jeff and Doug. So in AWS world, and particularly in professional services and throughout the organizations, they do a great job of working with partners to develop assets and standards with a lot of their kind of the brand name customers that we all see on commercials and the like. And they built these standards out of these problems, and then they really push them down to people like Cloud Products and Ironside. And so in the partnership, we are working, on some joint accounts, and even in a very collaborative way. We're on the Cloud Product side, where we're doing a lot of development to build more assets, vet out some things on the project side, in addition to providing some capacity on delivery of projects. And I know on the Ironside side, they are taking a lot of their existing project assets, how they've engaged with customers on-prem, and contributing that back to the AWS ProServe team, particularly on the data management pillar, right? So collectively, Cloud Products is really focused on the first 3 pillars of governance and the projects that come from that to execute to get customers kind of unstuck. Ironside really focusing on the data management pillar to get customers to the platforms that Jeff had detailed for us. So with that, I think we're at the point for questions.
So we do have a couple questions that have come in, but please, if anybody else on the call has other questions, please do submit them. Jeff, I think the first question is for you. What AWS account would the modern analytics framework live in a multi-account environment?
So definitely, I would follow the practice that Doug recommended, which you'd have multiple accounts. And so as you have, at the very least for the different functions that you'd have different knowledge workers performing, as well as people automating and transforming the data, you probably have different accounts for each of those use cases, and potentially, depending on how you wanted to manage it, possibly multiple accounts. And that really points back to the fact that for multiple governance reasons, including security and logging and audit, as well as budgeting, you want to split things up by accounts. So definitely that's why you want to have this kind of governance at scale program in place to make it easy to create and manage those accounts, which in turn makes it easy to manage your configuration and your financial management.
The second, probably a couple of people could answer, but Jeff, it sort of follows on to that one. How can data be shared to different development teams or data science teams?
Yeah, I'll start, and Doug and Chris, feel free to join in. I think that there's a variety of services within AWS that allow you to make data available, including S3, including Redshift, including as well as a bunch of query services like QuickSight, Athena. And so the idea would be, generally speaking, that if you're talking about data from an analytic perspective, that you'd leverage those services and to put data in them depending on what you wanted to do with it. So, for example, data scientists are more likely to use raw data that might be in S3, whereas a business user, might be going after a dimensionalized warehouse that might be in Redshift.
Terrific. If no one else has any other comments, Doug, I do have a couple questions for you. The first one is sort of what is the right balance? Do you think governance is friction to the CI/CD process, continuous integration, continuous delivery?
Yeah, I mean, if it's implemented correctly and you implement a framework like governance at scale, it should actually be the opposite of friction. It should really be kind of the grease that helps you manage a large estate and helps you scale without that friction slowing you down. So I think Chris spoke a little bit about that in the beginning. The ability to automate this governance function and making sure that you can that accounts are set up in the proper manner, that account structure is well defined and followed when those accounts are created, and that the right policies and procedures and configurations are applied to any infrastructure that goes into those accounts, and doing that in an automated way, and then following up and looking at that infrastructure over time to ensure that it maintains compliance, whether that's compliance from a financial standpoint or a data standpoint or a HIPAA standpoint or any other standpoint for that matter. That is exactly how you scale, is you automate that and then you alert an appropriate party and an appropriate mechanism and or take action in an automated way to address whatever the misconfiguration is. And that's exactly how you scale. And it's the only way you can scale a large enterprise in this environment today.
Thank you. And Doug, one more question. How does governance at scale relate to the well-architected framework?
Yeah, so several ways. We clearly work really closely with a lot of the commercial frameworks that come out of AWS, those being like the Cloud Adoption Framework, for example, and the one that you mentioned, the well-architected. You can think of these kind of as creating outputs. So well-architected will give you recommendations on how you can improve your estate. So you could think of it as additional policies, procedures, configurations, things that we know that you as the customer should be doing. And governance at scale is where you put them, okay? You take those recommendations, you put them in the framework, and then you constantly validate your accounts and your infrastructure within those accounts against all of those. And that, again, is how you make sure that you maintain compliance. It's also, back to this notion of innovation, and this notion of business agility. How do you do this without putting up gates like you may have today? It is exactly in this manner that you do that. You are very good at finding inconsistencies and, what's the word I'm looking for? Inconsistencies and places where policies and procedures aren't being followed, and then immediately reacting to that before a customer ever sees it, before a human being ever stumbles across it or something bad happens. And that's really how you do this. And so again, back to the question of how do we integrate with that? We're really the place where all those come to. So all the recommendations that come out of those great frameworks, it's where you put them.
Thank you.
And just to add on to that too is, and one of the things that we're seeing a lot with customers is that financial visibility into all of these things. Not just where oftentimes a lot of focus in the well-architected is around, how do I make my bill go down, right? How do I do smart things with how I am deploying resources and keep them running, how I'm buying those things. But getting that alignment to how organizations have budgeted, have forecasted, getting alignment for those resources via the account structure to back to those back end systems, so that when customers make those decisions around, do I invest in this product? Do I invest in this business maybe? You actually know what things cost, right? It's easy to have lines into revenue perhaps, right? But by using the framework, we really get into what all these digital products actually cost customers.
Yeah, it's a really great point that you made, Chris. this notion of like everybody wants to make sure that they're doing the right thing, right? That they're spending what they should spend, and they want to, cost optimize, right? What if you do this correctly, what it gives you is really clear insight into where you should be looking to cost optimize, rather than just this mayonnaise approach of saying, hey, why don't we take these hundreds, if not thousands of accounts that we have and all of this infrastructure within them and just go look for economy. That really isn't a successful kind of strategy. You really need to know where to look, and this gives you some insight into that.
Yeah, and take out a lot of the maybe chaos that happens when the bill shows up, right? And that is as customers move forward in their cloud adoption, and we talked about getting stuck, right? So it may be the case that a lot of organizations that their AWS bill is, let's say, 10% of their overall IT spend, right? And so people kind of acknowledge the fact that this is going up. It's becoming more of a part of our organization, and we're treating it different here. But it's 10%. I mean, obviously 10% still material, but not as material as it will become. And so when this is going towards 40, 50, 60% of their IT budget, having these practices in place is to have that visibility into spending. Customers were able to go from 0 to 10 without having a lot of visibility. And now, as the future is becoming more and more of their budget, people are starting to look at like, oh man, like how am I going to commit that amount of dollars to things I don't have visibility into the spend?
Great. I think we are at the bottom of the hour and the end of the questions. So do you want to close it out, Jeff?
Yeah, thanks very much, everyone, for attending. I hope you learned a lot about governance at scale. And of course, if you have any questions, please get in touch with us here at Ironside or at Cloud Products or AWS ProServe. Thanks very much, everybody.